Hey there, welcome to the Mental Perk podcast. I'm Carla Hutcherson, licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandy Mock, entrepreneur, author, and community leader. And we're here to talk about
real people, real issues, and real talk.
Welcome back to our show. We are so excited today to have Dr. Wakefield, as she is a board certified adult, child, adolescent, and forensic psychiatrist, and additionally has training expertise in reproductive psychiatry. Dr. Wakefield, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
We are so glad to have you. So you have just such an exciting and interesting career. And first of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I am the chair of the Department of Psychiatry here at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center out in Lubbock, Texas, and within our School of Medicine. So I get the honor and privilege of helping to lead this department to answer the call of all of the mental health and wellness, well-being of our area. And it's such a privilege to do that.
Well, that is awesome. I mean, we really want to get into some of the mental health care that you guys do and some of the things that you do to really help. Is it helping students, or is it helping community, or is it helping both?
Well, we have quite a breadth of reach here within the Department of Psychiatry. We have services that span from delivering consultation services within our partner hospitals, and that can be youth consultation services for children and adolescents, adult consultative services. We have outpatient services serving our perinatal population with the women who are pregnant postpartum, for a geriatric population, for our adults, for our children and adolescents. And then we also partner with the family medicine department here for student wellness for Texas Tech University, and provide psychiatric services to students within the university setting as well. So quite a breadth. We do community education. We have training programs for our medical students and psychiatry residents, like after medical school, people who are going into general psychiatry, which is really like a breadth of everything, a little bit of everything. And then child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship, which is really focused on developing additionally the expertise in children and adolescents and family systems. And then we also have training programs for psychology, for both child and adolescent psychology with internships and postdocs, and then also, graduate students. I mean, the list goes on and on. We are working with advanced practice professionals, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants to develop expertise and partner and collaborate together to expand care. And then other mental health clinicians too. So licensed marriage and family therapists, our licensed professional counselor partners, and also licensed clinical social workers. We just have, mental health is such a big topic, and
it is.
So we're trying to partner, provide education and partner clinically with just the entire span of clinical professionals so that we can really meet this challenge, because it's such a big challenge for our region, our state, our nation, the world.
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Wakefield. You are totally hitting exactly why we have this podcast.
Yeah.
And y'all are covering so many different buckets, and it's just going to be so interesting to hear your experiences with that, because mental health is so important. And I think the awareness of it and really destigmatizing talk about it and getting people to open up about it and how you can live normal lives while you're managing your mental health. And so I think it really helps people to understand that there is a safe space to talk about those things.
Absolutely. I one of the things I think about is that 100% of the population needs mental health care. That may look differently for all of us.
Right.
That may be a for some people. That may be a therapy session. That may include medication management. That may include lots of different things depending on what kind of mental health challenges that you're having. But 100% of us need mental health care. And I think it's always interesting to me when people talk about a stigma, which I know is there. I'm not saying there's not a stigma, but it's interesting that there's a stigma around something that 100% of the population is in need of.
Right.
Absolutely. It could even look like coaching or problem solving or working through things, even if you may not be suffering from depression or anxiety or some other cause. You know, there are so many things that you can use that guidance from, and just having a safe space to talk through problems that you're experiencing every day.
Yeah, totally agree. And that it's a community issue. When we don't have good mental health in our community, that's a community issue and requires community collaboration and community response.
It does. And we're seeing so much, man, what I'm hearing you guys do is so amazing. Every university should be tapping into exactly what you guys are doing, because it's out there, and it takes this right here, conversation, to make everybody aware that it's not a stigma. This is not something that should be abnormal. Everybody should be in counseling, talking to someone. It's normal. We need to normalize this more. It needs to be accepted. And so I think just through conversations like this, we're bringing it to the light. Talk to us, Dr. Wakefield. What got you into doing what you do? What led you to this path, this journey?
Oh, goodness. I think like most things, there are probably 100 things that led me to this journey. And I think back when I tell this story, it's not an infrequent question that I get, especially from medical students or people starting out, trying to figure out what they want to do and if this is the path they want to follow. And I feel like every time I tell it, there are a few different things that I might add or leave out, just because it's impossible to say every single little thing that guided you in your life choices, right? But when I think about just early on, my most interesting, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a cheerleader in the winter and a nurse during the summer. And I think
that sounds so beautiful. That just sounds so amazing.
I love it.
And I think that originally came from, really, I know that it came from my great-grandmother lived around the corner from my grandmother. And by the time I really have memories, she was bedridden. And I watched my grandmother and grandfather and great-uncle take care of her. And every time I went to visit, they would help me take her medicine. I would help with the medicines. I would help warm her milk. I would help do all these things. And they called me Little Nightingale, who, is a nurse. And so I really got this feeling of, wow, how wonderful it is to participate in someone's care, and, this sense of community around caring for vulnerable individuals within our families and within our community. So if I really have to look back at a starting point, that I do think that is it. I also remember being really young and busting my chin open and going to the hospital and asking them, like, hey, can you pull a mirror while you sew up my chin? Because I'd really like to watch it. And
wow.
Like, no little
yes, you're meant to be a doctor when you want to watch that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I look back and I think it was in my bones from really early. I loved my pediatrician. I thought what he did was so interesting. One of my dear friends' moms was his nurse, and I just loved going to their office and getting care. And I would be like, yeah, whatever I trusted him so much that if he said I need a shot, I was like, I must need a shot. Like, I just trust him so much. And again, just that modeling from a very young age about, working with someone to take care of your health. But yeah, I think that I was really, really interested in the body and how things work from a young age as well. And so when I was 12, my cousin was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He was 10. And my mom and my aunt are, really, really close sisters. And they raised us kids, our cousins, like almost siblings. We were together a lot. And so I spent a lot of time at Children's Hospital, Children's Health now, but Children's Medical Center in Dallas while he was getting his different treatments and chemo. We ran around that hospital and looked at the train room and ran over to Parkland and got McDonald's and did all of those things. And I loved being in the hospital. Again, I loved that the doctors made such a big impact, and not just the doctors, but the whole team made such impact for my cousin's care, and it was difficult. It was really hard care. He had a hard time with chemo, but he is doing great. And he went into remission a long time ago. And so just seeing those outcomes, but also how hard the care can be on that journey. So then later, by the time I was 12, I wanted to be a pediatric hematologist oncologist because I thought that
at 12 years old, you even knew what that
wow.
was.
Well, I think because of my cousin's journey,
Yeah.
that's what, before that I didn't. So I had said, all right, well, maybe that will prevent me from being a cheerleader. And along that way, I was a cheerleader. And
Don't limit yourself. You could have done both, right?
But yeah, so I said, all right. And I kind of set my sights on medical school from a very young age in order to do pediatric hematology oncology. And my parents would kind of laugh, but also like supported me. That Sarah said she's going to do that. So I'm sure she's going to do it. And I did a lot of different things along the way that my parents supported me in and putting me in different, classes or experiences. A small town girl from East Texas who didn't have a family member ever in medicine. They were like, we don't know how to get you there, but here, sure, go experience these different things. And so one of the things my dad had recommended me doing psychology in undergrad. He's an attorney and had done psychology in undergrad and really felt like it helped him understand people and understand things and helped him be a better attorney. And so I was like, yeah, I think that would help me be a better doctor, especially a doctor for people in these very difficult times, like oncology diagnoses and things like that. So I studied psychology in undergrad and really loved it, like fell in love with the way the mind works and how tricky the mind can be, but also how there are so many great things you can do to improve the wellness and the health of your thinking and your mind, and how, yes, there are interventions and treatments, but also there are just skills and tools to learn. And so that was really, really interesting to me.
I think that's so important, Dr. Wakefield. What you're saying is, and Brandy and I have come across this through other guests, is the importance of med students having a psychology background. I think you're pointing out the reason of that because the mind and the body do work very well together, and there's healing aspects to that. And you're pointing that out, and because I think that's such an important part of training as a medical person.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't figure out why we decided that these were separate entities somewhere along the way, that the brain is like disconnected from the body and should be handled separately. But more and more, we know so clearly that what is going on in the brain is affecting every different part of the body.
Absolutely.
Not just, but like how your liver functions, how your inflammatory system, or how you're responding to inflammation, or how inflamed your body is. All of those different things. And so it's really interesting, the data now that's supporting like, oh yeah, your brain is not separate from your body. So if you couldn't just look at someone and see that, now we have data to support it. And I think it is such an important thing for us to realize as an entire, not just medical community, but like wellness community at large, that these things, your mental health effect is your health, right? Like it really is your health, and it is a health driver, overall health driver. And so it shouldn't be an afterthought, shouldn't be a stigma, like it really should be a priority.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize mental health is a medical condition, and so when you're looking at depression, anxiety, all of those things are medical conditions, and so we need to treat them as such. And so if you can talk about cancer, you can talk about depression. They're medical conditions.
Yep, absolutely. And just like I sometimes use maybe like a hypertension, high blood pressure, or diabetes model to talk about it.
Yes.
Although there's plenty of emerging research about how if you can treat anxiety and depression, that cancer remission goes up and like relapse of cancer goes down. So, I mean, that is accurate as well. But when we think about like hypertensive model or a diabetes model, where there are so many things that you can do that would bring wellness, right? And depending on your genetics. So you have these genetic susceptibilities to different illnesses and to how severe that illness might be. And mental health, or depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all of those things are no different.
Right.
It is, and you don't own that susceptibility, right? That just exists. in your body, in your genes. But what you do own is what you do around that susceptibility. So how much, am I going to exercise? Am I going to feed my body, in a good way? Am I going to get appropriate sleep? Am I going to talk to myself in a healthy way? All of those are really, really important and can change kind of the unmasking of the genetic susceptibility that you have, or, make where you have to get less treatment or something like that. So I think, there's always, someone may have a genetic susceptibility that will require some form of actual intervention, medicine, treatment, just like in diabetes or in high blood pressure. But there may be other individuals, many individuals who are predisposed to high blood pressure and diabetes, but can manage it with all of these other things, without a medication.
Yes.
And mental health is the exact same.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I talk to a lot of patients in my office, and I have that same issue. Like we've tried many different techniques, CBT, DBT, all of those things to help them manage their depression, anxiety, and we're still just not getting to where we want to be. So we talk about medication, and maybe they're medication resistant, but just like you just said, I mean, when you're looking at treating diabetics, and I use that example in my office as well, we have to use the insulin to treat the diabetics, and then they can have a normal functioning life. And so it's the same kind of thing, is that it goes in addition to the therapy. And so the two together are working together to get the best treatment plan.
Yeah, I think for me, in diabetes, if you've done all of these different things, if you've managed your diet, if you are exercising, if you are doing all of these things that we know can improve your insulin resistance and improve your blood sugar levels, and you're still not getting there, there is zero shame in getting on a medicine.
Right.
Correct.
But in mental health, for some reason, even if you've done all this work, there still is the stigma of like getting additional treatment. And that's where I want to work towards. I don't want to work towards like anybody who ever feels distressed needs a high level intervention. I don't think that's accurate. Just like it's not accurate that anybody who has a high blood sugar needs, 3 different diabetes medicines.
Right.
But there are people who, because of their genetic susceptibility, because of how their body works, they can do all of these other things and should do all of those other things. We shouldn't stop doing those things because we go to a medicine, but they can do all of those other things and still require a medicine to reach remission. And we want to get to remission. So I think just trying to think of these diagnoses, just like you said, just like any other thing we treat in healthcare, can be really helpful and destigmatizing. It doesn't mean, oh, I feel sad, I need a medicine. It's like, I have done all of these other things. I'm going to therapy. I'm getting these interventions. I'm, coaching myself. I'm learning how to do positive self-talk. I'm getting good sleep, and I'm still having these symptoms. Okay, well, that's great information that my body needs this additional level of intervention. So let's go get it and get well.
I think there's so many myths around medications that it's going to make me numb. I won't be in touch. I won't be myself. I won't be able to feel like, I'm supposed to feel. And I think that what they don't understand is, just like with any medication and any illness, there's going to be side effects. And that's what you work with your doctor for, to manage those side effects. And then sometimes you have to make adjustments, and it may take some time for your body to get used to that, and making those adjustments with your doctor to get the right amount for you to be able to feel and feel like you normally would feel. But you're having the help of working through those chemical challenges or those genetic challenges in your brain.
Yeah, and I would say there could be side effects, right? Like, our goal is that you don't have side effects, but there could be. And when I'm talking with patients, I'm thinking, when we talk about medicine, I say, hey, I would recommend we start this medicine, and this is why. Now, here are the things that, if it's not going well, you could experience. Here are the things you could experience just as your body gets used to the medicine, and here are the things that you could experience if your body doesn't like this medicine. But my goal is not that we put you on a medicine that you feel bad on, right? That's never the goal. The goal is that we find a medicine that helps you improve. And that's the same thing. Like, if we started diabetes medicine for, insulin resistance, and it works really well and you feel better and better, well, great. If we started diabetes medicine for insulin resistance and you feel awful on it every single day, we're going to change that medicine or make some adjustments. So the same risk exists when you do, introduce a medication, but the goal is the benefit. It's just the benefit side. And I think it's really important also to have a risk discussion. Everybody talks about a risk benefit discussion. I'm like, everybody knows the benefit. The benefit is you feel better, right? Like, I don't need to talk to you about the benefit. I'm going to talk to you about the risk of not taking medicine versus the risk of taking it. And that's what we're going to compare here. And to me, that's the most important part of the discussion, especially when I'm talking to kids, like I'm talking to parents about starting a kid. I have 3 kids. Like, I know it's a big deal anytime you start an intervention on your kids. And also, I mean, I think about this whenever I'm talking about it with anyone, but also with pregnant postpartum moms, you know?
Yes.
So we want to talk about risk versus risk. Like, what is the risk of you not taking this medicine versus the risk of you taking this medicine, instead of just the risk of taking the medicine? And that's where I think we fall short sometimes, is we're focused on the risk of taking the medicine instead of like, what happens if we don't get you treatment?
Absolutely. And I think, working with postpartum moms, that's so important for them to understand that, because they have a child to take care of. And that's
I know
so
I went through postpartum really bad with my first pregnancy, but a lot of times, a lot of women don't realize that that's what they're going through. And so they don't know how to reach out for help. And, I was fortunate enough to have a doctor that would listen to me and see my emotional breakdowns and kind of made me feel comfortable with intervening, making sure that, okay, you're not on this for life. Your body's got to acclimate to carrying something for 10 months and it being taken out of your body's adjusting.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to make sure women feel like that's normal. It's normal to go through those changes and to feel the way they're feeling. And it's also normal to take medication to get you reset.
And it's important to talk to your doctor when you're not feeling like yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't imagine, I can dream up different scenarios, a horrible trauma at a certain period in life or something like that. But like as a normal life experience or a typical life experience, there's nothing else really where you have the dramatic life experience change at the same time, just environmentally, like what you're responsible for and what your schedule looks like and all of those things, in addition to the simultaneous biological shift.
Yes.
Around pregnancy. You're like, it's bananas how we're asking women to adjust to. And like many times we adjust and we're just fine. But it's not infrequent. It is not infrequent and it's not unexpected to have difficulty in that adjustment period. And that's the story I think we do not tell, right? We are like, Instagram, all these cute pictures. Yes. Look how cute my baby is. Look at this.
Yeah. They don't see the emotional breakdowns that are in between those pictures
they don't
that we're
see
taking,
the explosive diapers and the sleepless nights and all of those things.
Yeah. Which are all typical, like are all expected.
Yes.
So and then you have this mama who's never experienced that before and is sitting there looking at these other pictures going, why don't I feel like that? And I'm like, Mama, she doesn't feel like that either.
Yeah. That is so true.
That's just a split second in her life right now. That's not.
I don't think I ever post pretty pictures though. I was just not doing it,
But that is so true, Dr. Wakefield. That's such a good point. I think it's interesting. In when we were reading your bio, forensic psychiatry.
Yes.
Tell me about this situation. I am foreign to that. I don't even know what it is.
Well, forensics, anything when we're talking about forensics, obviously has something to do with the law. And forensic psychiatrists at baseline are really here to help educate around a question that can help like a system, sometimes the law, sometimes another system, really understand what to do next. And so I'll give you some examples, like things that are thought of very easily, very quickly for a forensic psychiatrist to do are things like insanity at the time of the crime. So did someone understand the wrongness of what they were doing when they participated in this crime? So that would be something that a psychiatrist would be asked to evaluate. Or competency to stand trial. So did someone understand, in the U.S., it is considered a right to understand what you're being prosecuted for and to be able to participate in the judicial process. And so forensic psychiatrists are often asked to do what's called a competency to stand trial evaluation. Does this person understand what's going on? And so as we prosecute them, can they participate in their own defense? So those are kind of pretty, I wouldn't say run of the mill. I mean, they're complex kinds of things to do, but those are things that people think that forensic psychiatrists do. We also, because we understand, like in a forensic psychiatry fellowship, you really spend a lot of time understanding like landmark cases, Supreme Court cases, how cases came about. And so sometimes we're hired by systems to consult with the system, like what are, to look at the laws and the policies of a system and try to improve things, especially around mental health care. That can be, about other things. And then we can help attorneys just know what questions to ask in a case and when they're trying to prosecute something or defend something. So I've been asked to do that in different cases. And then we also have a little bit different understanding or a more in-depth understanding of the incarcerated population. So I serve as a psychiatrist in a juvenile justice program. And so I'm able to kind of better understand that entire system. So how these kids are moving through the system, what's expected of them, what their major stressors are. It wouldn't require a forensic psychiatrist to do that, but that was part of my training. And so I really understand that at a different level.
Well, that's great that you can you interact with these youth at this time and understand that population, because it could make a big difference of when they get out and where they go from there. So I think having that, interaction with them at such an early age is going to help maybe later on. Are there any statistics or research around that?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of great, positive research that shows that if we intervene early, we really can change some trajectories pretty drastically. So the earlier we intervene. When we think about youth who are incarcerated, they typically have not had early intervention, and they've had exposure to multiple traumas and often poor supervision or exposure to communities that, where some behaviors are modeled for them, like drugs and alcohol use and things like that have really set them up for not being in a position to make very good choices, frankly. And then a lot of times they have high genetic loading for depression, anxiety, ADHD, things like that. So when some of my favorite things to talk about is how one or two enlightened witnesses in a kiddo's life can change the trajectory of their life substantially. And an enlightened witness is just somebody. It can be a teacher, it can be another adult in your life, it can be a treating clinician, it can be a lot of different people, but it's somebody who sees you, who sees a different future for you than than just before their eyes. And to me, that's the most important thing that we do for any human, is just see them in the context. Like, you're not just the sum of your choices. You are also all of these different stresses and pressures that you're under, and you could be different given different circumstances, right? And so that's my, I think, privilege, is to serve as an enlightened witness for these kiddos, to say, I see you. I see that you have had all of these things happen to you in your life. You're also struggling with all of these symptoms that people often misdiagnose or diagnose as conduct disorder or other things, and when I'm like, I see your trauma, I see your impulsivity, and try to help treat that, and then make a plan. I mean, I ask these kiddos, what are your goals for the next 6 months while you're in this program, the next year, the next 5 years? And many of them were like, no one has ever asked me that before.
Right. Yeah. And you're that beacon of hope, though. You're the beacon of hope that gives these kids some sense of normal feelings, because they don't have it. They've never had it probably in a lot of situations, but you're giving them that non-judgment beacon of hope and understanding that they've longed for.
And Dr. Wakefield, I also think that people do not truly understand trauma response and how it can be so different for so many different people. And these kids, a lot of them have been through so much trauma, and the things that they're seeing that they might call it a conduct disorder is really a trauma response.
I think that is such an important point that you're making. I was having this conversation yesterday where a kiddo that we know had significant trauma. I mean, I won't list it all for you, but it's a super downer, but really a lot of trauma, filled out a trauma scale and was a 0 on the trauma scale. And I'm like, okay, this means two things in my experience. One, they don't want to talk to you about it. They're like, no adult has ever helped me, and so why am I going to tell you what's going on with me? Get away from me. Or two, those traumas are so normalized in their community that they don't even consider that they're unique or that they should be, that they could be a cause of how they're responding.
Yeah.
And I see that both of those things happen so frequently, and people are like, oh, they don't have trauma, or, oh, they told me they're fine. Like, yeah, fine is my word, right? Like, we should just take it away. Fine is not, no one's fine.
Yeah, and I think research done around trauma is so important because so many people have trauma in their lives. And, people think it doesn't have to be a violent victim to have trauma. There's so many other things that can traumatize and can really affect the brain and how it processes it.
Yeah, if anybody ever wants to really go down a rabbit hole and understand this a little bit better, you can just search the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. There have been so many spinoffs of that study now, but to me, it is the landmark study of our time that shows, hey, the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more likely you are to have every health consequence that you can think of. And it's because that trauma, even if you don't remember the trauma, like even if you're a baby in a super chaotic environment and someone's not protecting you, and you don't have, because most of us don't have memory until we have verbal abilities. And so there can be things before we can talk that do affect our trauma response and kind of our biology in the future. But even if you can't remember it, that it sets up, it changes your neurobiology, like it changes how your body responds to future stressors and triggers. And that is, you might not be able to say this happened to me because you can't remember it. But are you not have, maybe the difference between a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, because you have to, for that diagnosis, you have to have some of those re-experiencing symptoms, and what you're calling like a trauma response. Like it's still a response, a biological response to trauma, even often when it doesn't qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD.
And I think that's so interesting. And I think, it just draws attention to the fact that the brain is a very complex organ, and it does so many things and it stores so much information. I also think that opens the door to you. I know that you've had your own little bit of trauma in your life. So I'm going to let you tell your story.
Sure. So, I think it's one of those things that at this point in life, it's not like I wished it would have happened, but it is something that I don't know who I would be if it hadn't happened. Now, I was 18 and a freshman in college. It was October, my freshman year in college, and I was far away on the East Coast going to college, and I'm from Texas. So, in an unfamiliar new place, and just developing friendships and those kinds of things, being a freshman in college. So there were a lot of different things surrounding what happened to me. But I was going to visit my future brother-in-law at his apartment, mostly so that I could write some papers, because they were groundbreaking on my dorm, or they were groundbreaking next to my dorm, and get to cut off our electricity for the weekend. And so I was like, I wanted to be a doctor, so I studied a lot, and so I was like, I need somewhere I can go write these papers. So I was headed over there. It was late at night. We had been out with some friends, and I was walking through the parking lot, and I remember seeing this guy and thinking like, I don't know what to feel about him. Why he looks, heavy jacket, is it safe? And I just kind of talked myself out of that thought. And I remember saying like, Sarah, just don't assume things about people. Come on, park your car, get out, you're fine. I'm going to talk myself out of that concern. Got my bag, got my stuff, turned around. He was standing right there beside me. So it was, what ensued after that was kind of a short physical altercation. I really had some worry that I was going to be sexually assaulted, and that was kind of how things were progressing. And so I just told him, I was like, listen, please don't hurt me. I can give you money. What can I give you? But I don't want you to hurt me. And he did stop. He just said, and I actually told him, I think it's an interesting part of the story. I don't know what to make of it very much. But I told him, I said, listen, I believe in the goodness of everyone, and please don't hurt me. Like, I'll get you money if that's what you need. He stopped assaulting me. But then he had a gun. And so he kept the gun on me, and he was like, all right, we're going to go to an ATM then. Cause he was like, do you have money? And I was like, not on me. So we went to an ATM. He took me to my car, and we went to an ATM, and he kept the gun on me the whole time. And I pulled money out, and I remember being like, I worked so hard for this money. I got a job my freshman year with all my hard earned money. So I pulled out the max that I could and gave to him. And then I thought, okay, he's going to leave. Like, he'll leave me alone. And he was like, get back in the car. And so that was maybe, I mean, it was all scary, but that was probably really, really scary, because I thought, well, what are we going to do now? Like, I thought, okay, I got you to stop hurting me. I gave you money. Now, aren't you supposed to leave? And several times in the car, he made me drive around several different places, and several times in the car, there was like yelling. And so it was a quite distressing event where I was like, hey, and at one point I told him, like, I've never done this before. I'm really scared. He kind of laughed, like, oh, you're scared. And it was, but at some point he said, all right, go back to the apartment complex. And I was like, all right. And so we went back there, and he sat. I'll never forget this. Like, he sat in the passenger seat, just like playing. He told me to stop the car, and so I did. And he sat in the passenger seat, just like playing with the gun that was aimed at me. And I was like, okay, is this how I die? Like, is this what happened?
My gosh.
And then he got out of the car, and I remember he said, like, I don't want to see brake lights or something like that. And I don't even know, really what that meant, but I floored it and left. And the apartment complex, and I just drove to some gas station, like the first lit gas station I found. And I pulled up there, and I went inside, and I think I'm like calm and composed. And the gas station attendant is like, what happened to you? Like, he's like, what do you need? Oh my.
Wow.
And I was like, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have anything. It was quite a while ago. And I was like, I need a phone. I need to call somebody. And so I called my future brother-in-law and talked to him on the phone. And he was like, where are you? Because I was supposed to be there. He was waiting on me. He was waiting up for me. And I don't even remember what I told him on the phone, but he showed up. And then we called the police and went from there. But I think in what was really scary. So I had a lot of traumatic nightmares from it happening, but my traumatic nightmares were of like sexual assault. It was like of all the things my brain was worried was going to happen.
Yeah.
To the that therapists over time were like, are you sure this didn't happen? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty, like, I really do not believe these things happen. Like, I didn't lose time. Like, I can account for every moment of this experience. But I think there were different points in time that I knew what what his objective seemed to be.
Right.
And then when we did go to trial, like, I had to do a lineup over time. They couldn't find him for a long time. And then eventually they did find somebody. The first time I did a lineup, I did not identify the guy, and they really thought it was one of the guys in there. And I felt really guilty. I said, I just can't tell. And so by this time, it's like 4 months later, I'm doing a second lineup. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, like, as soon as I saw him, I had already done what are those called? The sketch,
Yes.
Sketch artist.
Sketch with
Yep.
And I'd done all that. And I did this lineup like 4 months later, and my dad's an attorney, and I've learned I was a brand new psychology undergrad student, but I was learning how tricky the brain was and all of these things, especially when it's overwhelmed. So I was so scared to misidentify somebody. I really, really was. I didn't ever want to say someone did something to me that they didn't. And I remember when I saw him, like, my whole body just was like, oh my gosh. Like,
You
I had
knew
this
in that
trauma.
moment.
I did. Like, I felt like I did. My brain was like, are you sure? But my body was like, yes.
Wow.
And so I identified the guy. And later, thankfully for me, because it really helped me over time, when they went and interrogated him, he put himself at the place. He just told a different story. He said, I offered him money and, these different things. And so it was helpful to me that he put himself there,
Yes.
because there's no question in my brain that I was, had identified the right person. And then I clearly knew what happened to me. We had a big trial. And I had to testify against him in court, go to all the hearings prior to that and identify him. And so for an 18-year-old, it was quite a bit, and first kind of jaunt away from home and all of those things and really set the stage for a lot of things in my life, because I had some pretty serious PTSD.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, it's funny to me because I see kiddos and individuals with much worse things that have happened to them. And I think, wow, my brain went to PTSD, without having all of those things. Just the fear of having some of those things happen.
Yes.
Were enough to tell my brain, like, the world is unsafe and you are not okay. It was a traumatic experience overall. I'm not saying it was nothing, but just, thinking how powerful the brain is in convincing you, when I was telling someone the other day, I said, I've been through a lot of treatment around this. I had a lot of support. I was in this wonderful college, Virginia Wesleyan, in Virginia, and the whole college just wrapped their arms around me. People came and got me to make sure I was eating and getting out of my room. My professors were amazing. Like, everybody was so great. So I had immediate support, and it was kind of the best that it could be in that way. And then I had, over time, great treatment. I had some not great treatment during that time too, but I had some great treatment eventually. And I'm very knowledgeable about PTSD and neurobiology and all of those things. And still, I'll walk in a parking lot and, late at night by myself, and my heart kind of revs up. And I'm like, one night that happened a long time ago, and it's still coded in there in my body, to try to protect me. And it's just so interesting how the brain can be so powerful like that.
Well, you go back and talk about how you had that gut feeling, when this started. You had that gut feeling. Something was telling you something's off, and you kind of just dismissed it. Like, you're probably overthinking it. And then exactly what your gut was telling you happened, right? So I would think with all that trauma that you went through, I'd have a hard time. Going through and walking through a parking lot now, like you just said. And here's the deal. I'm thinking when you're telling this story, Dr. Wakefield, you didn't have a cell phone. Was it we didn't have all the cameras back then. Yeah. And then the being re-traumatized 3 or 4 months later in a lineup. And
then the trial itself is a whole other trauma.
You're opening up wound after wound after wound after wound. So I can't imagine.
But I also think it really highlights the importance of understanding PTSD and that it really is lifelong, because you're going to get treatment and things can get better, but it still is going to affect you. And you have to be aware of that there can be little triggers, smells, sights, sounds that will trigger you later on. And it's about learning how to manage those.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right? Like, it's not, when I have that feeling in a parking lot, it's not like, oh my gosh, my PTSD is back just like it was. Like, I am there's a problem. It needs this humongous treatment. It's more about also giving myself grace and self-care and like, oh, Sarah, look, it's happening again. And one of the hardest things about my treatment later on, just my self-treatment, and working through and working on these, like, when we think about CBT and challenging these cognitive distortions, thinking and all that kind of stuff, was that I needed to challenge my cognitive distortion, and challenging my cognitive distortion is what got me abducted. So it was really, really hard, because I would tell myself, like, okay, no, it doesn't make sense. You're afraid of that man walking on the other side of the sidewalk. Like, you're okay. It's broad daylight. But then it was like, my brain would at some point say, but last time you didn't listen to yourself. But now my gut feeling was off. It was on this hyper alert, in this PTSD unchecked, hyper alert. But then the other side of my brain was like, don't you dare not listen to what you are afraid of, because that's what got you in danger. And so that was really, really hard in treatment. And I think would have maybe been different if I hadn't had that early conversation with myself that night of like, you're just being, you're being unkind, you're judging somebody, like, don't do that, go. But it was really hard later when my brain would be like, oh, this is the same situation, you should get out of this situation. And my treatment, in treatment, I'm trying to challenge those things and stay in the moment and control my breathing and do all these things. And so it was quite an exercise.
Yeah, and I think there is a distinction between a cognitive distortion and a gut feel. And I think that's what we have to kind of look at. Is this a gut feel or is this a cognitive distortion? So that's hard to do because most people can't do that.
Yeah,
and I think
it is hard.
I think what you had in that moment, you had a gut feeling that something didn't feel right.
Yep. It is. And I treat myself, I didn't listen to it. I mean, I clearly didn't listen to it. And I still remember how I felt that night where I was like, oh, I shouldn't feel like this. Like, I don't want to honor the way I feel because I feel guilty for feeling like this, like this person could be dangerous. And in retrospect, they were dangerous. Mm-hmm. And there is this, and I think it happens with all of us, but I also think it happens, often with young women where we're like, hey, don't listen, you don't trust yourself. Like, you're not trusting, like, I don't know that we're taught to really trust how we're feeling in a situation, right? We're taught to make everybody else happy in the situation, at least that's Southern women thing, right? I don't know if everybody is feeling like that, but I feel like I didn't want to offend anybody.
Yes.
Even in my mind, they wouldn't have even known they were offended. If I got in my car and went somewhere else. But
yes.
I take so many pains not to offend someone that I was willing to put myself in danger to not offend.
And I think that's such a good point that we have to balance out, not offending, setting up good boundaries, listening to our gut feel, and realizing that those don't have to all be bad, right? It doesn't have to be bad to do those things. And I think that right now we worry about, are we judging people? Are we misreading people? Are we not giving them the benefit of the doubt? But at the same time, that can put you in an unsafe situation.
Yeah, it did me. And then and I thought how right I was to feel like that,
Yes.
and it was, it's hard. It is hard because our brains they're designed to what I call otherizing people. You don't look like me. You're not dressed like me. Like, you must not be like me. And is that dangerous?
Yes.
And so we want not to come to that.
Right.
Because there's so much joy in learning about other people and other ways of doing things and engaging in that. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So we want to overcome our brain's typical pattern of otherizing, but we don't want to do it to the point of saying, of just ignoring those other gut feelings you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the other neat thing is that you kind of put in all the different aspects of your training and you made yourself a human being to him, which maybe saved your life that day. So I think that's really important too, how you used all of your skills to really personalize and make yourself human and make him see you that way. And so I think that, that's really important point as well.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. I'm never quite figured out what to do with that information because I think it did save my life. Mm-hmm. He had multiple trials and got consecutive sentences, and not everybody was as lucky as I was. And there were sexual assaults, and there were some who didn't survive. And so it is a really, I think that is, like I said, it's hard for me to wrap my head around what to do with that information. Like, oh, good job, Sarah, you did this, and I think, well, you shouldn't have had to do this.
Yeah, right.
But
absolutely.
It does serve as a reminder about the power of human connection, even when people are on, intensely doing something kind of out of their mind, right? Yes. I do believe that he was likely on drugs during this time and not really thinking clearly. I was in the courtroom when, he was not on drugs, and when his mom stood up and cried about what, her baby and things like that. And I think that this actually helps me in the forensic work that I do. I am able to see people. I'm even able to see him as, a human who made really bad decisions, probably because of other bad decisions that were being made. And I don't know that whole story. And I will tell you that I don't have a big desire to go and know his full story, because that's just not something that I want to do at the moment. But it's helped me want to know other people's full stories who are in not dissimilar situations where I was not the victim. And it's helped me see them beyond like their behaviors, even when their behaviors are heinous. It's like, okay, I can see this. And not that I think you shouldn't get consequences for your behavior, but like you're more than your behavior.
Yeah. And I think that's a blessing in disguise, Dr. Wakefield. I think your insight on that, it just 100%. brings it more personal. I think that that's a blessing to me. A blessing, the way you see it it's tremendous.
And you have been so insightful on this and just giving us so much great information. We probably will love to bring you back. I know we will. I mean, because there's so many things that I want to ask you and that we're not able to ask in this period of time. But you have so much information. You're doing amazing work for the mental health community out there. And we are just so excited that you were able to share your story with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, if it can help one person really think about that you can have mental health challenges, and that doesn't have to define, or it can define you positively. Like I said, I think about my experience being a core part of who I am. Not that I wish to have it, not that I wish it on anybody, but that I really think of, the phoenix rising. Like you are created anew. You don't like go back to who you don't restore yourself. You like grow from all of these different experiences, and then you get that that meaning in that trauma or in that experience, whether it's how I got treatment for depression or anxiety, or how I recovered from this horrific experience that I had, or anything like that. And so the more we can talk about it, the more we can share it, the more we can honor our experiences and how we're working through them, I think the better we'll be as people and as a community. So thank you so much for letting me be some small part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wakefield. If you or anyone you know is struggling with any mental health issues, we want you to reach out to a friend, a trusted family member, somebody you trust. We want you to get connected with a professional. If you are having self-harm thoughts or suicidal thoughts, we want you to get immediate help. Dial 911, go to the nearest ER, or you can call the National Suicide Hotline at 988. We at Mental Perk want you to know you're worthy. We're in this together.